Okay, so yeah, my webinar talk today is going to be a little bit about, actually mainly about my journey from, I would say, the last 2 years of my undergraduate education to now. Uh, Abstracts just indicates what I've done at the Amos conference, as well as applause and presenting, and then some tips and tricks um, on those concepts. And then I talk a little bit about my research. So if you have questions, keep them in mind. Let's see. Oh, okay. So what's on the to-do list today? I'll share with you a little bit about my personal background, beyond what they've already said. So that was a great introduction. So thank you guys. I'll talk a little bit about shifting from academia to industry, finding your why, and I'll explain more about that later. Abstracts, posters, and papers, presenting a network or networking, and then shifting back from industry to academia and kind of what that was like for me. I don't know how to make this go away. Okay, well, anyway, so a little bit extra about me. I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, USA. And I also grew up with a passion for all things aerospace and aviation. So I got my pilot's license a couple years ago. And then during my time in undergrad, I think Mahad may have mentioned that I took part in a zero-G experiment, which if I never get to be an astronaut, that's the closest that I ever got to going to space. It was really, really cool. I got to test out something that we had been working on all semester. So yeah, there's a picture of me. I graduated 2022 from Purdue, Boiler Up. Also had a certificate in entrepreneurship and innovation, just in case I ever decide that I want to start my own company or something along those lines. I'm not sure yet. Still figuring that out. And then there's a picture of me here at Amos talking about my research and my work, and it was an absolute blast. I can't wait to tell you more about it. And then Mahad actually mentioned that he met my grandpa. This is my grandfather over here and my grandmother. And everything that I'm about to tell you is because of them. And it's too bad that they can't listen to this today. But every accomplishment, every achievement that I've ever had in my life is because of those two. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so my vision, my dream started when I was 6 years old. My grandma sat this massive picture book called Deep Space into my lap, and I remember I would be trying to turn the pages and they would be like flapping me in the face because the book was just so big, but it was filled with all these amazing pictures of stars and galaxies and these brilliant nebula. Um, and I put two and two together and I realized that living out in the country, those were things that I could see. Those were things that I could just walk outside and look at. We didn't really have much light pollution, so I could just walk outside and look at the Milky Way on a clear night. And then 6 years later, I begged my parents to let me go to space camp, where I absolutely fell in love. I was hooked. I learned to launch rockets. I spun on the multi-axis trainer. I got to land a fighter jet in a simulation, which was really hard. And I think the biggest takeaway from that experience was that I learned about space debris for the very first time. So you can imagine a bunch of 12-year-olds sitting in a classroom together, and our two leaders were teaching us about the debris problem. And there's all this trash and all this junk that's being created that is surrounding the planet, and we need to do something about it. So here you've got 5 minutes, design some kind of mechanism, some kind of mechanical thing that can take care of this problem. And most kids came up with pretty good ideas. They came up with these giant nets, which I'm pretty sure some companies are working on right now. You grab the space junk and then you chuck it out into space, or you chuck it into the sun or into the atmosphere and watch it burn up, and that's how you take care of that problem. Some other kids came up with these vaporizing lasers, where you shoot it at something and then it blasts into tiny pieces, and hopefully everything is small enough and it slows down enough that it can re-enter the atmosphere. And then there was me at 12 years old coming up with the most trivial solution, a space dump truck. Um, I'm not really sure what I was thinking here, but now I'm pretty sure that somebody is working on, or some company is working on something like this. So if anybody ever tells you that they already thought of the idea, they didn't. My 12-year-old self did at space camp in July of 2011. So keep that in mind. What was so cool after this is that they took us into the IMAX theater at camp, and they showed us a video of of scientists and engineers who had already come up with these exact same ideas. And I realized in that moment that if I could think of something that, you know, people with PhDs could think of, then maybe this was a problem that I could help solve. And like every other kid, I grew up wanting to be an astronaut, but I also decided that if that never happened, because the chances of that are extremely small, if that never happened, then I wanted to contribute to the space community in some kind of meaningful way. Um, and I decided that space debris was a problem that I could help solve from the ground. I actually learned recently from one of my lab mates at school that eventually all the debris that surrounds the planet will inevitably coalesce into a ring, much like Saturn has rings around it. And I don't want that. I think we need to keep our infrastructure safe, our astronauts safe, especially if we want to continue exploring and moving on to Mars, and keeping space looking nice and beautiful for generations to come. So space sustainability is important to me, and I think it's necessary for humanity. Okay, so now I'm going to jump a little bit to my shift from academia to industry, and some tips and tricks. And I think this might be one of the most important slides. So please pay attention. And if something doesn't resonate with you or doesn't make sense, please let me know in the end and we can talk about it. Okay, so my first lesson for anybody that is transitioning from academia to industry is that in your first year, or maybe even your first 6 months, you're going to feel out of place, and you won't know anything. You will know it, your boss will know it, and maybe even your colleagues will know it, but it is perfectly normal, and it's actually a good thing. If you feel like this, then you are in the right place, and you are going to grow. Um, okay, so this one's a little bit weird. I had to think about this pretty hard last night. So I went from being a Boilermaker, somebody who thought they were hot stuff in college, to a nobody, to sort of a somebody, now working at EXO and in grad school. And that's okay, because you are not an elevator. It is impossible to jump from the ground floor to the 100th floor. If your floor is 2, if your floor is 10, that is perfectly fine. You just won't have as far to go as other people with arguably loftier goals. And the point is, you can't skip your foundation, or you'll be putting icing on a cake eventually that doesn't exist. And this was I think my first mistake that I made at undergrad was I thought I was doing enough in my clubs to get an internship or a full-time position. I thought if I simply finished school, that I'd be ready to conquer the world. And I was very wrong. So if you have lofty goals, you have to take it one flight of steps at a time and one step at a time at that. So every day at the end of work, in both my internship and my current position at EXO, um, I came home, I did my chores, and got back on the computer, whether it was YouTube, online classes, Google, you name it. I was teaching myself the things that I needed to know to go back to work the next day. And every single day, I watched another hour of Python videos or something about orbital mechanics, and I was slowly climbing my staircase. And this one, I cannot stress this one enough. Um, if you take nothing else from this presentation, take this. Ask, and ye will likely receive. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey. I'm assuming if you're not from the United States, you may not have. But essentially, the movie is about this guy that constantly says yes to every single opportunity that comes up to him. And I dare you to put your ego aside, to risk looking stupid, to seek out every single opportunity that you can think of. I don't care if you think you're gonna look dumb doing it or you're gonna sound dumb asking for it, do it. Anyone who is anyone has failed 100 times before getting where they are today. I I actually went to a training meeting for my company in my very first week of starting there. And they shipped me out to California because that's where our headquarters are and that's where my CEO works. And I was sitting across from him the very first day that we started our meeting. And for some reason, I worked up the guts to go and talk to him and ask him about our company's business model. Just this absolute newbie, nobody goes up to their CEO who's been doing this for years and says, "Hey, are you doing this right? Are you sure about this?" And so that led into more questions about, how can I fit into this company? What kind of research can I do? How much freedom is there to choose my own project or choose my own path or contribute something of my own to this company? And a year later, I got to go and speak at the Capitol building in DC. I got to train my own intern, and then I also got to write a paper with him and present it at the Amos conference in Hawaii. So again, ask and ye shall receive. Almost every opportunity that I have ever been granted was simply because I asked. And this is what will distinguish you from everybody else. If you are fine with a regular 9 to 5 job and you just want to go home at the end of the day, that's perfectly fine. More power to you. But if your goals are bigger than that or require more than that, you're going to have to make things happen on your own. Nobody is going to send you reminders. Nobody is going to nag you. You have to actively stay curious, look for new conferences to go to, look for new projects to get on, look for new skills to learn. Point being, nobody's going to do it for you. Only you can. And yeah, if you take nothing else from this today, go forth, seek, and ye shall find. Okay, so the next point on my journey was determining my why. Like I had just previously mentioned that I went to space camp and I figured out that space debris was the problem that I wanted to solve, but I ran into some issues in my last year of undergrad and then entering my first year of the industry. So this is going to sound a little bit silly, and because I'm a farm girl, I really like my analogies. So I imagine undergrad or the undergrad experience as a bunch of sheep within a fence. And that fence is kind of like the bounds that allow you to stay on track. You say, I want to graduate in 4 years. I want to do this specific major. I want to take these specific classes. And that is the entire reason why you can go from high school to a really good job is because you stayed within that fence or you stayed within a like a certain tunnel. And I realized that I I couldn't just go straight from undergrad to industry, that I had to craft my own new fence because once it opens, once you graduate and you're out, if you're still a sheep, you're still running around in the grass everywhere, and you have plains over here and trees over there, and everything just looks great, and you want to do everything. But if you have objectives, if you have goals that you want to meet, then you are going to have to craft a new fence for yourself. You are going to have to put bounds on what you want to do. And that that doesn't necessarily mean that you're restricting yourself. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Um, but it keeps us disciplined. So I would suggest that if you are still in undergrad, if you're a junior or senior, or if you're in your first year of transitioning to a real full-time job, um, start crafting your new fence for yourself. Start determining what drives you and why you are pursuing that specific path. Let's see. Okay, so one of the things that I did was start a vision board on my wall in my apartment. And it was actually inspired by a talk that I heard a couple years ago. It was called The 10 Keys to Success. I think you can find it on YouTube. But essentially, what it is you have these 10 major like core values, um, not necessarily in your life, but towards your career, towards your goals. And that can consist of, setting clear goals, having a strong work ethic, consistency, discipline, and I will never quit attitude. And these have always reminded me of the core values that I have, that keep me working towards the things that I want. And underneath those values, mind you, all these are on sticky notes currently up on my wall. I have 3 columns under those core values. The leftmost column is for my very, very long-term goals. So like finishing my master's, finishing my PhD, getting my instrument reading and flying, etc. And then the next column is for short-term goals. So it's, I want to publish 1 paper by the end of the year or have it submitted for review. I want to attend X many conferences this year, or I want to build a robot or learned about electronics engineering, something like that. And then the third column is my list of all my sticky notes that I have crossed off and that I have said I have done this. And it's really good to look back on, because I think whenever we are striving for our goals, we can often lose sight of the fact that we are still capable of achieving them. At least I know sometimes I do. I go and I try to set higher and higher goals every year for something new, and I get this awful imposter syndrome. And I just have to, I go back to my vision board and I tell myself, look, I did all of this last year that I said I was going to do. I did all of this the year before that I said I was going to do. I can stick with it. And then, of course, to go along with that, just follow through. If you're going to put something up on your vision board, if you want to start one, make sure that you are following through with the tasks and objectives that you are assigning yourself. And that's one of the core values about staying consistent and disciplined. And then, of course, dive into your interests. If you really like something, go after it, research it, make it, ask about it, etc. This will set you up for the next couple of steps and tricks and tips that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so groundwork has been completed. If you've done all these things, then you are ready to move on. Okay, so this is kind of the meat and potatoes of my talk. I think choosing choosing to go to a conference every year is something that I think anybody who is involved in research or anybody who is really interested in the industry that they work in, I think they should go to one every single year. Um, whether it be, to get better at writing papers or presenting or networking. There's IEEE conferences, there's AIAA conferences, AMOS. I think Space Generation Advisory Council does a really good job of listing those on their webpage. So if you're attending here today and you're not a member, then I think you can still check it out. Um, but I think at least for Amos in particular, where Mahad and I met, that really rides up the chain of space safety, security, and sustainability. So if that is one particular area that you're interested in, I think it's open to both international and domestic students and industry members. So if you are interested, you should definitely sign up. I think the abstract deadline is coming up March 1st if you are interested in going to your first conference. But yeah, there's if you don't know, there's engineering based ones, scientific ones, military and government focused, NASA. I think the best way to break into this is to know where your knowledge and talents lie. And your best shot at getting in is aligning well with that specific conference's mission, if that makes sense. Hope I'm not going too fast or too slow here. Okay, so creating a good abstract. I think one of the most important things is remembering your why, remembering your reason, because it will guide you to a specific topic that you want to talk about. Um, so I talked to my CEO last year, I think, at this point. Year before, sorry. And I told him I was interested in doing some kind of research. I wasn't really sure what it was, just something related to debris or plasmas or something. And he said, "Well, I know a guy, and we're gonna try to start, working on a paper. And if you'd be interested, I'll let you kind of take the lead on the whole thing." Um, so our company, Exo Analytic Solutions, we have telescopes all over the planet, and we are able to watch things out in orbit. But the only problem with that is that, which I'll get to later, is that we can't really see small pieces of debris well. And so I actually found something that my now advisor is doing. She got a grant to use knowledge of plasma physics to understand characteristics of debris, because they create these weird waves whenever they fly through the atmosphere. And so I started to become interested in plasmas, and that's how I brought it up to my CEO, and he was a plasma physicist in college or graduate school, I think. And so he was like, "Yeah, we saw these, we have pictures of these really interesting plumes of these spacecraft way out in geo, and we're not sure what they are. We're not sure, how they were formed. We don't really understand much about them. So, if you're interested in plasmas, take the lead on it. Go for it." So I wasn't sure if these plumes that were coming out of the spacecraft were fuel dumps, if they were regular plumes for maneuvering, if they were ice crystals, if it was some kind of interference with the magnetic field and the plasmas that are present out at GEO. But what I did know is that there wasn't currently a classification system for these plume types. And I thought that it might be a really great idea for, SSA and domain awareness, because if you don't know something about a spacecraft, but maybe you can classify its plume, maybe you can kind of backtrace that and say, hey, if it's creating these certain types of plumes, then maybe here is where it's located with respect to our Earth's electric and magnetic field, and maybe here's the type of propulsion system that is currently equipped. And so that was my why, and it made it really easy to dive into the project. And so, like earlier, I said that after work every day, I would go home and I would practice. And once I got put on this Amos project, I went home every day and I started reading one of the plasma books that one of my colleagues gave me. So keep your why in mind. It will guide you, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. Next bullet point, 75%, at least this is my personal opinion, but I think it works. 75% of what you promise in your abstract needs to be doable for two reasons. Reason number one is you don't always have a whole lot of time between writing your abstract and finishing your paper for submission. So make sure that whatever you propose, that you can actually do it, at least almost all of the way. Sometimes there are results that we leave until the end and we say, you know, this is future work that either we can do later or somebody else can do later, and that's perfectly fine. Second reason is that experts are going to be looking over your abstracts. So I keep using Amos as an example. It is a massive technical conference. So they are getting applications and abstracts from people all over the world, hundreds of them, and they have to read through all of them and make sure that they are premier, that they are good enough to be looked at, talked about, read, you name it. And they will know to some extent, I would say, whether or not you can actually meet what you are proposing in your abstract. So keep it doable. And then finally, of course, triple check your formatting, word limits, deadlines. I think these are often what weed people out of conferences, I would say. So I was reading through a bunch of the technical papers of Amos from last year and the year before, and I noticed that quite a few of them actually hadn't been finished. Sometimes they would just trail off in their sentences. Sometimes the formatting was way off. Sometimes they didn't even use punctuation at the end of their sentences, like right up to the end. And my guess is that they weren't paying attention, or they got so distracted by other work that they had, that they couldn't fulfill all of the requirements, but they still had to turn in something. I think at least for Amos, you have a contractual obligation. So, well, kind of contractual. So if you submit your abstract, then you are, you know, saying I will submit a paper. So I'm assuming that even if you're not done with it, it's still going to get submitted. But nevertheless, people are going to look at it. And if you want to maintain a good reputation, I would say just make sure you're checking on the little things. And even if you are up at the deadline submitting something, try to finish it off with something nice if you can. Okay, so I keep talking about Amos. Give me a second. So these are examples of if you haven't submitted anything to a conference before, this will be new to you. So these are some abstract requirements for Amos. You have to give something on your paper title, an abstract, a summary of your presentation. You even have to put in keywords. You have to confirm that it's novel content. And then you have to also choose your primary topic, which is over on the right. And there's many areas to write about, especially in SSA, it would seem. This is only like a third of the list. So if you see something on there that interests you, just know that there is a place for you and a place for your papers in these conferences. Okay, so this is the second meat and potatoes of what I want to talk about. Not just making a good poster, but a great poster. I have been making posters since I was 10 years old, usually multiple times throughout the summer for my local and state fairs, which I can thank my grandmother for that. So much like me saying ask earlier as one of the big takeaways for this, if you get nothing else out of this, at least you will know how to do a proper poster. And please, for the love of all things good, fix them. Um, there is nothing more that any of us hate than reading, especially when you're in your classes all day or you're still in academia and you're reading your books, you are reading your research papers, and then when you're in industry, there's nothing more annoying than when you have to read your emails all day. Whenever you go to a conference, um, all of these people that are there are pretty much there for vacation. The very first thing that they're going to do is grab a drink, and then the next thing they're going to do is go in and talk to people. But the last thing they want to do is read posters. So please take a picture of this, save it, use it as a template for something in the future if you have to make a poster for a conference. Um, but essentially, at least from my experience, what I've seen, a lot of people will take what they did from their papers and directly copy and paste it into their posters. It's insanely wordy, it's very unorganized, it's very hard to follow, and you go up and look at it and your eyes cross. Like you don't even know where to look first. Um, so here's what I suggest: having a visual statement somewhere big in the center of your poster. So for mine, it was these pictures of the different plume types that I was talking about. Um, and then having these section headings can help a lot. I think that if you are able to read those and have a pretty good understanding of what the poster is talking about, you're golden. Oh no, I'm drawing on my screen. Um, I don't know how I did that. Okay, anyway, using bullet points instead of paragraphs. Please, 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 please use bullet points. Do not write paragraphs on your posters. Nobody is going to read it. They're going to come up to you and ask you what the heck your poster is even about. And also put references at the bottom. So this black and white picture right here, if you can see my mouse moving, this was taken from a book that I referenced, and then this picture down here in the blue with the pretty colors was a picture I took from another paper. I think it's good practice to mention and give credit where credit is due, especially if you have taken information, just like in a paper, you put your references at the bottom. So for your poster, just put your references at the bottom as well. Um, but yeah, don't copy and paste, please. And at the end, if you forgot to take a picture of this, I'm going to come back so you can take a picture of it. Oh, I don't know how to get rid of this line. Does anybody know how to get rid of this? Feel free to unmute yourself. I'm not sure I know how to do that.
Well, I think this is an annotation that was turned on from
Was
your
it?
end. You can see like a pen on your
Ah,
screen
there we
somewhere.
go. Beautiful. Thank you. Okay. All right. So moving on to writing your paper. All right. So most conferences, I believe, will want between 5 and 10 pages. Try not to overdo it. Um, don't add too much fluff. There, more often than not, you will have more to write than you think you do. Um, I was working on my Amos paper with my CEO, and we were at like 5 or 6 pages, I think, and we still had a week or two left to go, and I was freaking out. Um, and by the end of it, I was like 3 pages over, and I had to condense it. So if you get to this point, don't worry. If you did, some good research and really dove into it and know what you're talking about, you won't have any problem meeting page requirements. Um, so one of my biggest pet peeves when reading papers is not understanding the natural flow of it, or not having any background understanding. So if you want your paper to stand out, I would suggest providing a section that is deeper than just a literature review. Um, give a section on the fundamental knowledge. Someone would need to understand your paper. Otherwise, what's the point of reading it? Um, in my engineering classes, my freshman year, they always taught us to explain something to someone or explain to someone how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as if they had never heard about it before. Um, so when you write a paper, it is generally good practice to assume your audience doesn't know anything, especially for a conference, I would say. Um, help them out, write out your steps, define your words on a fifth grade level if you have to. Make it easy I think, to say the least. Um, in writing that, I was thinking about in my research in grad school all of the times when I would be reading papers and I was just lost one page after another. I would read it through twice, three times, skim it, write notes, and I would still not have a clue as to what was going on. And maybe that's my own ignorance and not something any of you have to worry about, hopefully. But the way I like to think about it is make a paper, design a paper for your younger self who doesn't know anything. Design a paper for somebody who has absolutely no idea what you're talking about and pretend that that's you. And I think that you'll write a paper that people actually thoroughly enjoy reading. Okay, yeah, don't be afraid to bring others on the paper with you. So I needed some help with my foundational knowledge. I didn't completely understand how plasmas worked and how plumes worked whenever I first started this. So I had to ask my CEO a lot. And even though I started early, I noticed that I had started running out of time. And so I asked some of my colleagues in my office, who are much faster at modeling than I am, if they could, generate some plots for me, because I needed to show some results at the end, and I was still focused on writing, and because they helped me, of course, I put their names on the paper, and I think that dividing up the tasks is a great way to not only make it easier for you, but also to include other people. I was actually really surprised at how surprised my colleagues were when I told them that I threw their names on the paper and mentioned them. And I don't think that they should be shocked. I don't think that should be a normal thing. Um, I think it should be normal to include people in your research, because I know that part of being in the Space Generation Advisory Council and this international organization is that a lot of us believe that space is for everybody, or at least idealistically we do. We hope that one day it gets to that point. So, if you really believe that, then bring others onto the paper with you and allow them to contribute. Um, generally, people will have ideas that you haven't thought of before, and it can actually make a much stronger paper. I know that in academia, sometimes it is frowned upon to have second or even third authors on your paper, and generally you're supposed to show that you can do research on your own. Um, but when you're in a conference setting and you're with all of these other people, I think it's just a great idea to um, to work with others on the research that you're doing. Um, that's not to say that you can't do it on your own, and if you want to, go for it, props to you. But yeah, I think at least in a conference setting, one of the best ways to make connections as well is to work on a paper or project with someone else who isn't from your department, whether it be an academic department or a work department at your company, or maybe it's someone from a completely different company altogether. And then the last one, start early, type a little bit every day. Give me a second. So I actually went on a 2-week road trip with my family last August to Yellowstone. And it was like 2 weeks before the Amos paper was due. And I was just typing away and freaking out because I'd started on early and I couldn't understand why I was losing so much time. And in between, looking at bison and looking at the mountains, I was typing. And at night, when everybody was asleep, I was typing. So the earlier you can start, the better. I think at least for Amos, there was a waiting period between when you submitted your abstract and then when you heard back about it. I think go ahead during that time period and start writing anyway. Because if you end up getting accepted and you hadn't written anything, then you have like 2 months less than you would have had you started early. I mean, I think that's especially true for a technical document. Okay, so next one is presenting. First and foremost, your visual aid. Like I've said many times with the poster, this needs to be easy on the eyes, easy on the brain. If you were someone watching slides all day, you would probably want it to be fun and easy to follow. So here is an example of what I'm talking about. So this isn't a presentation that I did publicly, but it was for my Martian research in undergrad. And my advisor told us that one of the best ways to convey your information that's easy for people to understand is to have one sentence up top explaining what the slide is about, what you found, your technical results, and then having some kind of plot or visual aid underneath it. So in this case, it was about finding, or my topographic data was telling me that there were more volcano calderas on Mars than originally thought. And then the plots just show kind of what the difference is between craters and volcanic calderas. So I saw, I think, one or two presentations at Amos this past year that were really good, and most of their slides were graphics, because I know, again, most of us hate reading. So if you go and you have to present, definitely design your slides like this, and I think your audience will be a lot more engaged. Um, and of course, speak confidently, practice before you present. Something that always helped me is that I should be able to explain my entire presentation without ever needing to practice, assuming that I did the work. So if you ever get stage fright, assure yourself that if you get stuck, you can always fall back on that. One of the best presentations that I ever gave in my life was in high school, and I completely winged it. And my grandma was so mad at me because she taught me all these years, you have to practice, practice, practice. You have to memorize exactly what to say. And during this last presentation, I was like, I know what I'm talking about. I don't need to practice. I'm going to try this out and see how it goes. And it ended up being the best scored presentation that I had ever given in my life. So be rest assured that if you put in the work, you can talk about it. Don't fret over your presentations. And I think that's also the beauty of speaking in crowds, is that it's true, nobody knows what you are going to talk about until you tell them, and nobody knows what you're going to say except for you. So if you messed up or forgot something, they won't know unless you say something. Also, another general tip that I observed while I was at Amos, if people ask you questions at the end, it actually means that they were really engaged and didn't check out. I found myself in all of these presentations that I was watching throughout the sessions that oftentimes the one that just or the ones that kept running on for longer and longer periods of time, I couldn't stay focused. I was falling asleep, and I of course felt really bad about that, but I wasn't generating any thoughts. I wasn't generating any questions. And then there was just this one that was so interactive and really involved the audience. And by the end, he had people just absolutely lined up to the microphone for questions, and ran out of time ran out of time to answer all of them. And so he just told everybody, like, hey, I will talk to you at the back of the room afterwards. And I think that was probably one of the best presentation experiences to witness. And I hope that if you guys go to conferences that you get that kind of experience too. The more conversational you make your presentation feel, the more involved your audience will be. Okay, networking. This is the bread and butter of attending a conference. Um, when I went to Amos, it was very hard to find me sitting down alone. I was always talking with someone, be it about the fact that we attended the same university or talking about what they did for a living. And I guarantee you that almost everyone that has, or everyone that is at that conference with you will have similar interests to you, whether it be about space or aviation to some capacity. And if you really want to round up the nerds, that there's no better place to go. So I would say invite them to dinner, ask them if they're looking for any kind of collaboration with your company or a certain type of research that you're doing as an undergrad or graduate student. So like if I wasn't talking with somebody, I was also getting educated because people see that, and I think that that's kind of an underlying part of networking is that people are always watching. So I attended a short course on space debris. I asked to sit with my CEO during some of his meetings. I asked questions at the major sessions where people were having presentations and panel talks. And so I would say just get involved as you can because people do see it, especially if you're a university student still. Um, if you go to one of these things, go do everything. Get as involved as you can because you never know, you might strike up a conversation with somebody who is looking to hire. And then, of course, afterwards, always follow up. This is a very magical thing. If you get an email or a business card from somebody, email them back. Maybe not the day after, but maybe whenever the conference is over, and tell them that you're interested in continuing your talk about XYZ. And even if you aren't, you have no idea the people that that person might know. Especially in the aerospace industry, I would say it is as much who you know as it is what you know. So the bigger you grow your circle, the better. Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about my transition from working at EXO to grad school. So I always knew that I wanted to go to grad school, but I'm really happy that I figured out early on that I needed a year of industry to understand what it is that I really wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to build up some experience, build up a network of people who could have my back and try to get as many opportunities as possible. Um, at the time that I started thinking about the application cycle for University of Maryland, um, I had discovered some shortcomings from working at EXO, not in a bad way, but in a like a research sense. I learned that when it comes to the space debris problem, I may have mentioned this earlier, that regular radar and telescopes, even our telescopes, can't while they can see really far into orbits, they can't track small debris, or at least the way that we are processing data, we can't figure out how to show small debris in that data yet. So like I said, my now advisor had recently gotten a grant to research new methods of detecting debris with plasma physics. And so I'll explain a little bit about it. So whenever debris flies through space, I shouldn't say fly, but whenever it orbits in space, it gets charged by the sun. And as this debris kind of comes a little bit closer into the atmosphere and flies through the ionosphere, that that charge that is built up on them can interact with the ionospheric environment and generate something called a soliton. Now, a soliton is just a fancy word for a wave. So if you were to get in a boat and go out on the ocean, you create wakes behind you. Sometimes if you're going fast enough, you'll create waves in front of you. And we think that if we can't directly detect debris, that maybe by observing the surrounding environment, maybe by observing these waves, we can determine characteristics about the debris, such as where it's located, how fast it's going, how big it is, maybe even what material it's made out of. And so that's what kind of facilitated the conversation with my advisor when I first reached out to her. I leveraged what I was doing at work and shortcomings I discovered at work and connected that with um, what she was doing in her work and the grants that she needed students to pursue. Um, I made it very adamant to her, or very apparent to her, that I really wanted to solve the space debris problem, and that never in my life had I dreamed about using plasma physics to solve it. Because all these other companies are developing, like I showed you earlier, the giant nets, giant lasers, and maybe even some spaceship dump truck something. But I think my point in this is that your advisor has a lot of pull in how you get into grad school. So if there are any of you in here that are still in undergrad, or any of you that are in industry thinking about going back to grad school, um, try to connect what you're doing at work to what your advisor is doing. And I think that starts facilitating a very good relationship. And that shows your advisor that, or that shows the professor that you're really interested in their research and have done some of your own independent study into it. Um, Actually don't even think they looked at my application when I applied. I think my professor was just like, yep, this is it. So hopefully some of you guys will have that kind of experience. Um, so yeah, I think I would recommend graduating from your undergrad and then going into industry for a year. Internship, full-time position, co-op, something, whatever it is, just go and take a year off, let your brain cool off, and actually open your eyes to all of the opportunities that there are. Um, Gain a little bit of money in the process, that helps a lot, and then really hammer down what it is that you're interested in. Because I got to be on a lot of different projects in my first year at EXO, and the Amos project just completely solidified it and helped me get into grad school. Um, so yeah, and then your first semester back is probably going to be very difficult. I know mine was. I've talked to so many grad students who are in their PhDs now that said that their first semester of grad school was the hardest, and I think it's even more difficult when you've taken a year off to get back into the groove of your classes. But back to that fence analogy that I made earlier, I think all you need to do is make a plan. So if you decide to start a vision board, create goals for your year, I want to go to so many number of conferences. I want to go to so many workshops. I want to write XYZ amount of papers, blah, blah, blah. But I think if you worked for a year, you now have a team of professionals who can help you. So sometimes I might every once in a while go to my colleagues and um, either complain about my horrible semester, or I'll ask them, how do I do this for my research kind of question, or hey, I have this astrodynamics question. Can you explain it to me? So they've been really great, and it's very helpful to have that kind of support group. And they you never know, they may even want you to use your newfound knowledge that you're getting from grad school to help in something with the company. And I was fortunate enough that EXO let me stay on part-time while I go to grad school. So what I'm doing at EXO and what I'm doing for grad school are basically the same research. It just makes things easier, and I get to keep my network, my circle of people open and active. So yeah, leverage your connections, continue to ask what you can do to help or head a new project, be it in academia or industry. Okay. With that, my key takeaways from this are, ask if there is something that you want to do, just ask. If there is an opportunity, you don't know if it exists, but maybe you're interested in it, and you're in academia, go ask your professor, go ask your advisor. If you're in industry, go ask your colleagues. I did this last year and it was amazing. I asked one of my colleagues, like, hey, I really want to go to a workshop and learn more about the industry and learn more about such and such. Where do I find those? How do I do that? And he just pulled out like an entire newsletter, an entire list of workshops and conferences that I guess they email out so often. And he's like, oh yeah, you can do this and you can do that. And I'm like, what the heck? I'm gonna sign up for all of them. Obviously I didn't, because then I would have been very burnt out. But the point still stands. If you want to stand out from your peers, if you want to stand out from your colleagues, if you want to stand out to your advisor, your CEO, your boss, ask for opportunities. Um, I don't know how much more I can hammer that in. Make your posters and papers easy to read and follow. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I have hammered it in maybe a little bit too much. Yeah, I won't say any more about that. I'm sure you get the gist of it. And then of course, network some more, and then network some more. Again, this industry is as much about who you know as it is what you know. So always find somebody to talk to, collaborate with, try to get on their good side if you can, and um, keep growing your circle. It will massively impact your career and your future outlook. So I hope you got something out of this. I hope your conferences are successful. I hope you thought of some new ideas that maybe you hadn't had before. I hope that I've clarified something for you that maybe you were questioning, and I wish you all the best of luck. Please, please, please ask me questions and feel free to email me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for that amazing talk. I really enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm sure all our participants today have something very, very useful to take away from your experience and everything that you shared. So, once again, thank you so much for your time and your effort. Um, I would recommend you to take a few minutes of rest, while I would urge my fellow participants to write down the questions in the chat section. Or if you want to interact directly with Adrian, you can raise your hand. I think, Adrian, that's also fine with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Well, we had one question first that was about your email, which now is visible on the screen. So
Yeah.
you can take a note of Adrian's email, and then you can definitely write her any questions that you might have as you come up. All right. Also, there was one question from Chris about some conferences that allow online presentation option, because he says that it's a little difficult to get financing for international trips, to which Mahad actually cited Atmos Tech has some virtual presentation options. Beyond that, if you have something to add more, Adrian, you can go ahead. And Mahad has also raised his hand, so I would also allow Mahad to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yes. Oh, go for it.
Go ahead, Adrian. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I think after COVID, a lot of conferences are allowing you to do some kind of virtual option now. I know that there was the International Something Debris Conference in Texas. Um, and someone I know did a virtual event because they couldn't go. And I recognize that some of the difficulty of going to these conferences is, getting funding to stay in your hotels and eat your food and actually attend because the registration fees sometimes are just outrageous, especially for university students. Um, but yeah, Amos Tech is a good one, and then IOC, which is the debris conference in Texas, are two that I absolutely know about. I hope that helps.
Thanks a lot, Adrian, for that amazing answer. Mahat, you can go ahead.
Um, yeah, Adrian, thank you so much for this amazing talk. Even I could have literally take all the lessons that you told us back into my repository of lessons and start applying them as well because I'm in the process of writing abstracts for literally for COSPAR, for AMOS, for IAC, and it has been very difficult to compartmentalize all the different ideas that have been crossing my mind. And starting from why is a really important thing that I also want to emphasize on because it actually takes you, it gives you your answer, what you want to write about. And that the 75% formula, this is the first time I'm hearing it, and it is so practical because there was a time when I submitted an abstract in which I only had 20% in mind, and the 80% was things I thought I could do. At the end of the day, I had to, withdraw my abstract. And lo and behold, that conference was Amos.
Yeah, that was a big thing I was stressing about whenever I first started. It took me a month to write my abstract. I know that some of my colleagues who have been doing this for years, like they can just hammer one out in a couple of days, maybe even a couple of hours. And it took me an entire month because I knew that if I didn't already have a very good idea of what I could do, I probably wasn't going to be able to do it. And I also assumed that the conference committee was going to think the exact same thing, that like if it's too ambitious, if you don't have concrete reasons for every step that you plan to take, or most, three-fourths of the steps you plan to take, then you're likely not going to get accepted into the conference. So yeah, I just thought that that might be a good thing to keep in mind, a good tip to share.
Absolutely, absolutely. And secondly, the networking part is I cannot emphasize more on it. We are sitting here today because I we networked at Amos, and I made it to Amos because I networked with Dr. Brian Whedon when he was at IAC in Paris, and I shared my very immature young professional ideas about how space traffic management should be dealt with, especially from the perspective of emerging space countries, and how the developed space countries should need to change their attitudes towards space traffic management. So Brian was like, I mean, I thought I was just picking his brain too much, and later he got in touch with me, and at the end of the day, he invited me to be one of the keynote panelists at Amos. And that's how I made it to Amos as a young professional, talking about my ideas about space sustainability. So back to the point that Adrian mentioned, networking is really, really, really important. Um, if you want to do something, ask. If you have an idea, talk. If you are unsure, still talk. Um, Adrian, thank you so much for the wonderful talk, for the very basic and very, very amazing lessons that all of us should take back. I have yet to start my PhD with 10 years in industry and academia, not industry, in government and academia sectors. So like I could really use those lessons to that how it can be done.
That's yeah, that's great. I was just hoping somebody in here got something out of it. I learned best in my years from listening to other people share their experiences, and I think I felt a responsibility to do the same thing. So I'm very happy to hear that you got something out of it. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mahad, and thank you so much, Adrian, for that wonderful conversation. And Adrian, as you can see in the chat, you have a lot of compliments and appreciation from our members for today's wonderful talk. So I have nothing more to say. So,
Oh,
guys, um,
I think there's one question
all right, go ahead.
from Rachel. She asked, how do you go about researching a new niche topic? Any tips for developing our technical skills? Okay. Courses online and books. And if you are in academia and you're trying to break into a new topic, I would go and find a professor. Go and hunt them down, and talk to them. I've done that a couple times already this year. My main major is aerospace, but I still have to take like some plasma physics courses for this particular research that I'm doing. And so I'll just go and sit down with some professors from the plasma physics division, um, and just listen to what they have to say. And I think that along with trying to teach yourself via books or YouTube is one of the best ways that you can break into a niche topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. Guys, please feel free to put your questions more if you have in the chat section. Meanwhile, connecting from the conversation that Adrian and Mahad were having about conferences and getting funding or scholarships, I would like to show you something that we are doing at our project group. So this is the website of the Space Safety and Sustainability Project Group. I would put the link in the chat so that you guys can check it out after this webinar. If you are interested in joining this project group, just scroll down and you can use the join our PG now option. There's a very short form, a Google form that you can fill out with your own details, and our members will be in touch with you really soon. Here you can learn more about our project group and some of the events that we have had. But also you can check out our current projects, our past projects, and blogs written by our members. But I would like to draw your attention to one of our events, which is the essay competition that we organize annually. And here you can see this was for last year. And the winner of this essay competition actually gets funding to attend SGC, and IAC together. So last year, the winner of this essay competition got a scholarship of funding to attend both these joint events. They are held together in Baku, and this year it's gonna be in Milan. So if you guys are interested in looking for scholarships and funding opportunities to attend IAC and SGC, do check our website out. We will be opening our call for this year's as a competition in a couple of months or so. So you still have time. Meanwhile, I highly recommend you to join our project group, stay in touch with us, and also build your network towards that big event and also towards your career. So that's what I had to add more. Um, so yeah, Jake says that his key takeaway from today's presentation was to ask questions.
Good, good. Thank you.
So you see,
If you want to do anything, you have an idea, you want to get in touch with a company, you want to get in touch with United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, join our project group. As soon as you write that you're a member of Space Safety and Sustainability Project Group at Space Generation Advisory Council, you automatically have a stamp of approval, because Space Generation Advisory Council has done a lot of good, impactful things. So anything you want to do, come to a project group and lead your own project. And we are literally trying to make this platform interactive and available to all the young professionals to do anything that you want to do. So get in touch and let's make your dreams come true.
Right, absolutely. Thanks so much, Mahad. Well, for Andrea, yeah, this webinar has been recorded and it will be posted on SGAC's YouTube channel. You can expect it in a week or so. So I would highly recommend you to go to YouTube, search for Space Generation Advisory Council, and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that when it's posted, you can definitely get notified. Meanwhile, you can watch the first episode of Webinar Wednesdays that's already there on the YouTube channel. Um, Jake says, how much time do you need to get the application reviewed? Because he applied some time ago in January. Well, Jake, there has been a transition in our team. We have some new members onboarded recently, so it might have taken some time, but you will definitely hear back from us really soon. And going forward, the review process and the response time would be much more efficient and really quick. So definitely you can be rest assured about that. All right, so I think that brings us towards the end of the second amazing webinar of our series of Webinar Wednesdays. Once again, thank you so much, Adrian, for your time and for this amazing presentation, amazing experience shared with us. Thank you so much to Mahad and other participants for being interactive and making this event really meaningful. Stay in touch with us. Keep an eye on our social media channels on our website because very soon the third episode of Webinar Wednesdays will be posted and with some amazing new talent, amazing new information, we will be back to cater to you. Yes, Mahad, some final words?
The third episode of Webinar Wednesdays is just very different. We have sustainability filmmakers coming up who have produced a documentary of terraforming on Ascension Island. So we have a professor from a university in the US, I think Brooke Owens, or no, some one university in the US. He was the academic lead for the movie, two co-producers, and then we'll be talking about the documentary and how terraforming on Ascension Island uh, actually translates to the use of space resources and space mining, and how the sustainability lessons can be learned from these two projects. So that's happening on 6th of March. Put it in your calendars, and we'll be making an event for that very soon. It's going to be amazing.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. I'm all up for it. I'm sure you guys are also very excited. Spread the word amongst your network. Stay in touch because we will be sharing it soon and let everyone know in your network so that you can get the flavor of this one of a kind event because getting a film producer and director in a webinar, that too on an SDSC platform, is going to be very unique and exciting. So on that optimistic note, we take farewell from you guys. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy and keep learning, keep being curious, and hope to see you all again really very soon. Take care, and that's it from us today. Signing off. See you soon.